Hi everyone, and welcome to the next instalment of build of Bronco's 17-pounder self-propelled gun, the Archer in 1/35th scale. In this video, it's going to be very much a tutorial on oil paint rendering, better known as OPR. Now, this method is done by Rinaldi, who's a professional modeler. All his links are in the bottom in the description. If you want to pop along and check out his channels, he does some superb work. But in this video, we're going to show my spin on how I do oil paint rendering. So if that's something of interest, then pull up a chair, get a brew, and let's do some modeling. So first off, we set out the palette of oils. Primarily, I use Winsor Newton and Abteilung 501. Earth colours, dark colours. Obviously, we're going to be using some greens in here as well. The main ones for the dirt are the burnt sienna, raw umber, and burnt umber. If you leave it on a piece of cardboard overnight, that allows the linseed oil to drain out and helps the drying process for the oil. I personally have 2 containers of thinner, one to clean off the brush initially and then another one just to rinse it out. And then I have a variety of blending brushes that I use during the process. And then I use round 2 from Rosemary & Co. For the actual application because of the fine tip that it has. And this is the piece of kit that we're going to be using in this tutorial. So first off, what I like to do is to lay down a dust layer. So here we're just mixing up some of the lighter colors that we have on the palette. And what you want to do is not produce a wash, but slightly thin consistency with the paint. You'll see also have a paper towel there, and you can use that to make sure that the consistency you're happy with before applying it onto the actual model itself. Takes a little bit of practice and getting used to, but you'll soon get the hang of it. And also the actual piece of kit itself has had a light covering of thinner to start with, just to get any sort of dirt and dust off of the area, so that you have a clean piece of kit to work on. So just mix it up until you're happy with the consistency and the color that you want to use. Just adding a few more bits of colour there. We've got a bit of buff, bit of dust. And then once you're happy with the colour and the consistency, it's just a matter of don't have to be too exact at this stage. Just do a light application, because what we want to do is blend that all in with the blending brushes. Because one of the key parts of oil paint rendering is to go from light to dark. So just, as you can see, dabbing the blending brush, taking off any of the excess and just working in that colour. And you can see already what a difference it's making to the original colour, making it a lot lighter. And as I say, during the oil paint rendering process, we'll make that darker and just add different types of highlights. The main thing with oil paint rendering is you're trying to create a period in time. So the way to do that is to add layers. So here we're adding a light layer, and then we'll build it up with some speckling layers, and then some other darker layers and some wash layers. Obviously on other areas of the tank you'd add in pigment layers as well. So it's all about adding on the layering process to create that moment in time. Now the great thing about oils is that they do have a fairly long drying process, so if there's anything that you're not happy with, you can always change it up. However, as you will see in a moment, we can also use that longer drying process to our advantage when we do the oil paint rendering. So basically just working my way around, very haphazard, adding in all the dust effects to create a light area which we can build up some darker areas. For those of you wondering what the brown piece of kit is on the background, that's in fact a map board. It has a green canvas exterior, and then inside was the actual map board itself. So as and when the commanders wanted to work out where they were going or their positions, then they would just unhook that from the side of the Archer, place their maps on there, and then they could have a chat. And then once finished, if they wanted to, they could fold it all up, put it away, or as you can see there, it is put in openly on the actual panel of the Archer. So just working our way around. This is very much a wet application, and then blended in. Another key element of oil paint rendering is reference photos. A lot of the time I'll have a computer just to my left hand side with black and white pictures of different types of weathering, and I'll try and incorporate that look on my actual models itself. Now here you can see I'm doing an up and down motion, obviously to try and get some of that streaking process going. But those are your two main ways of applying the paint, is by dabbing or by using the up and down streaking motion. Each type of motion creates a different effect, and with a bit of practice you can work out which ways are best for you for the look that you're trying to create. Please don't worry about all the injector marks. I've checked all of those. They'll all be covered by the smaller parts when they are added to the side panel. So there we have it. Now, one of the other key elements of oil paint rendering is to use the hair dryer in between each stage to dry out those oils to allow you to continue with the process. And once that's all been dried, as you can see, I've got a very, very dried with a little hint of thinner on blending brush, and what I'm doing, I'm just dragging down and creating a better effects with the streaking, as you can see there. One thing I will add about the hair dryer, do not put it on high heat, otherwise you will end up melting your plastic. So just do it on a gentle heat, and be very careful not to warm up the plastic. There we go, it's coming along really well. But with all processes, we don't always get it right, and as you can see here, I'm actually going to be dragging far too much of the oil work off. That's probably because I either had too much thinner on the brush, or there was too much oil on the area. So just be a little bit careful. But the great thing about oils, you can always just take it off and start again. So with the streaking done, again, use the hair dryer, dry it all out, and then we add on some speckling. Now, speckling is dependent on the amount of thinner that you use. So the more thinner you use, the larger your speckles, and they'll expand outwards. And if you use a little bit of thinner, then you'll get more precise. So for me personally, on the first stage of speckling, I like to go for the thinner wash type speckles, because that gives you more of a sort of background dirt. And if there's any that you don't particularly like, as you can see here, I'm just going in with the brush and just letting it all really sort of create rain effects, dirt effects, because the majority of this is going to be lost anyway in the other layering. But anyone coming to have a look at the final look of the panel will probably be able to see this in the background, and that's what you're aiming for is in the layering process. So hair dryer on it, and as you can see, that's all dried out really nicely now. So now we've done those first 3 layers, we're going to be a little bit more precise now, a lot less thinner, and what we're going to be doing is going for the darker dust tones, and we're going to be somewhat more precise. And what we want to do is to sort of create the dusty look that you would get, say, at the bottom of the panel, in the crevices and the creases, and just try and make it as realistic as possible with the dust effects. Again, we're using the blending brush as we go. Like here, I'm just dabbing it on, but in a moment I'll also use the up and down streaking motion as well. Now, because there's hardly any thinner in this paint, you're not going to be dragging off all that hard work that you've already done before. And as you can see, I'm a lot more precise where I'm putting the paint, and somewhat more precise in where I'm wanting to blend it up. So my thought here is just to have a little bit of a dust layer near the base, where this will be added to on the actual main body itself. And we'll repeat that process all the way along the bottom edges. Now, it's always easy to miss some crevices, or you may get a little bit of spillage or something that you miss. So always check your work, make sure you're happy with what you've done, because if you do have to change things further on down the line, you're going to affect all those other layers that you've done. So when the oils are fairly moist, just check your work to make sure you haven't made any mistakes as you go. Or in the words of the mighty Bob Ross, if you've had any happy accidents. So happy with the way it went along the bottom. So now I'm going to try and create some shadows and dust effects around the areas where I feel that the dust is going to accumulate the most. So we're looking at the fixings here on the mat board. Probably a little bit too large a blending brush here, so you can always use some of your smaller ones as well. The key with your blending brushes is that they must be bone dry. You don't want any thinner on them at all. This is probably one of the reasons why I have a few blending brushes, because once you've been blending for a while, they do start to pick up some of the thinner while doing the blending, which can cause problems going forward. So as you can see, I'm always taking off any excess as I go, to try and keep that brush as clean as dry as I possibly can. Also, if you want to, it's entirely up to you. You can have different brushes for the different colours. So if you're darker colours, you may want to have a fresh brush and blending brush to do those processes. So a little bit of dirt and dust around by the pipe as well. We'll just blend that in. But just to re-emphasize, this application is a lot more precise than the original sort of wash application that we did at the start. Now we want to enhance that effect of rain coming down, because this is an open-ended vehicle. So we're just going to load that brush up again. And then dab it in with the blending. And working all the way around again. And while I'm doing this, as you can see now, we're starting to build up the timeline of how the dirt and the rain and the grease and the grime has all been added over a period of time. And that's the whole reason for oil paint rendering, is to create those layers. So airbrush, get this right one day. Get the hairdryer on that, and with it all bone dry, we can go back and add a few little streaking effects again. Again, make sure that you keep this blending brush fairly dry. We don't want to be overpowering it with the thinners. And as you can see, that's what happens if you do. You just drag all that good work that you've done off. So you do have to be very careful. It's not a major issue though. We can just blend it all in. Add a few heavy streaks there. I must admit, this panel was a bit of a pain for whatever reasons. Sometimes it happens. Sometimes you get areas that just don't go the way it should. But because oils are completely versatile, there's always something you can do to work that one out. Now, as you can see here, I've got hardly any thinner at all in this paint, because now I want some more precise dust effects. Obviously, you can't see this going on, but I could at the time. And this way is a lot more precise. Don't go overboard. You don't want to cover the whole thing with it. It's just really just to add a few little specks here and there. And then once done, just clean your brush and your knife off there. So there we have it. Very pleased with how that's going. So that's another layer done. So hairdryer all of that. And now what we're going to be doing is, this time we're actually going to be adding the pin wash. And just do it normally like you would do any other type of pin wash. I tend to sort of paint mine on rather than do the capillary action. Because we will be doing a darker pin wash later on. So with the dust pin wash being somewhat broader than the more precise darker ones later, you do get quite a nice effect, as if there's sort of dirt on top of dust rather than the other way around. Now if you feel you've put a little bit too much on, even once you've hair dried it a wash, there'll still be a little bit of dampness there. And that will allow you to be able to blend it out if you so wish, which I'm just doing on this part here. So that's the next layer done. There we go. So you always check your work. Made a little bit of a mistake there, but with the oils you can just take it off, no problem at all. So that was done, and that was changed into streaks, so that worked out fine. So hair dryer on that once done, and we'll get the next layer, which is going to be the first of the dark layers. So here we're using the burnt umber, which to me is basically dirt in a tube. And again, hardly any thinner at all, because we don't want to be taking off that dust layer. And here we're going to be even more precise than we were on the last dust layer. And what I'm trying to do here is to sort of create some sort of streaking effects. So once added, we'll just blend that in with the brush as normal. But if you remember from the very first stage that we did with the dust, that was just sort of whack it on and just blend it in. Here we're being a lot more precise and trying to create actual dirt effects, because we're now getting to the final stages of the oil paint rendering process. So not to bore you too much, but I've done the whole piece myself now. Most of the dirt is in the creases of the panel, also along the top as well, and that creates a nice effect. And next we're going to be doing a little bit of raw umber in there as well, just to create some more shadows and effects. And this time there's absolutely no thinner whatsoever. This is all going on neat. Now, because it is going on neat, oil paints do go a long way, so you only need to add a very small amount and blend it all out. And again, we want to try and highlight these ridges. Obviously, you get the full effect once the panel is actually added onto the main tank itself. This is one of the reasons why you need to get a round 2 pointed brush, so that it allows you to do this precision work. You do go through a few brushes with this process. One brush like this will probably last me maybe 2, maybe 3 builds before you actually need to change it out and get another one. But they are handy to keep hold of, because you can use them for blending as well. And keep offloading that blending brush, because you don't want to keep moving too much oil around on the surface. And the key really is precision, being very precise not only with the application but also with the blending as well. So just using a slightly smaller brush now, just to finish that off. So there we go. That's had the hair dry on it now, and those rain effects and dirt effects have come on really well, and they've blended in nicely with the dust effects that were put there before. So that's another layer done. So now eventually we're going to be finishing off with some speckling. So I mean, I haven't kept count, but I mean, we must be looking at 7, maybe 8 different layers being done. And if you notice, we're just doing one area at a time. That's all you need to do. And then when you go on to your next piece of kit, then obviously you've got this as a reference to the look that you're after. Although that looks fairly wet at the moment, the speckling, that will dry in quite nicely. Now for me, my final layer is that I do like to do a dark pin wash. So I'm actually using sepia from Abtelung, and this one's, as you can see, a very small brush and a very precise pin wash. And the aim here is to make sure that you don't make a mess, so that you don't have to blend anything in, and then you can just leave this to dry without having to revert to any blending at all because obviously we're using quite a bit of thinner now with this pin wash, and the last thing we want to do is to be blending that out and taking off all the good work that we've already done. So here you have to be very precise and careful. So there we are. We'll just leave that to dry now, and that will obviously take the shine off, and that will come out really nice. Now with all the dark colours and the dust colours being applied, obviously you're going to lose a little bit of the colouring. So what we need to do is just to add back a little bit of colour here and there. So I'm just using the greens now to improve the look of this canvas wraparound of the mat board. Again, this is all precise, precious little thinners being applied. And we're just adding shadows to the creases, etc., and to make it look somewhat more realistic. So as you can understand, there'll be lots of mucky fingers all over this, so just want to add that sort of impression of dirt and grime on the canvas. So that was a little bit of olive green there. Now we're going to add on a little bit of raw umber just to dirty it up a little bit. As you can see, I'm putting hardly any on at all, just kissing the sides there. And then that will just be given a gentle blending. And using the two blending motions of dabbing as well as the streaking as well. That's coming on really well. And if we turn our attention to the actual wooden board itself, what I'm trying to do here is just add on some wood effects. So a little bit of dust work in the corners. And again, no thinner, this is all neat oils going on. So with the different types of dust colours, you can create some lovely little effects, making it looking more like wood. And then we'll use some burnt umber just to put some wood grain effect in here. Now because this, as I said before, because this is neat oil, this will spread out, so you have to use very small amounts. But now we can use that to our advantage when we do the blending to create a nice wood effect, as you'll now see. Again, be very gentle, because we don't want to take off all the good work that you've done already with those lighter layers. there you have it. We just add a little bit of dirt to the edges, just so it differentiates from the actual canvas back as well. Gives you much better definition. And there we are with that final layer. That's come out really well. So what we're going to do now is have a quick look at the accessories, to show you how oil paint rendering can not only be used to create effects on the main parts of the tank, but also on the smaller accessories that you'll always get on this type of build. Principles are the same. So first of all, we're doing that general dust layer. Because these are smaller pieces, we don't want to be overstating it too much, because we don't want to be losing that colour. So there is obviously a lot less oil paint going on this time around. Now a lot of people say to me, how are you supposed to weather black? Well, the great thing about weathering black is if you turn it light, i.e. greyish, then you've got a nice light colour to start with, and then you can darken that up. So again, one of the great advantages of oil paint rendering is adding that initial dust layer to make it light, so you can build back up the darkness and the shadows. This is the little first aid kit. So add some little dust tones there. And don't forget, in between each layer, to use the hairdryer to dry it all out, so that you don't mix the oils as you go forward. And then we have the little instrument panel. I'll just give that a quick dry brush over. So again, now that it's all dried out with the hairdryer, what we can do is just use that blending brush again to create the streaking effects. Now look at the effect on the black one. See how that? Look at that. You got weathering straight away. It's a nice technique. This, it does improve the look straight away. So again, dry that all out, and then we'll add some speckling effects. As you can see, I'm using slightly darker dust tone now. And because they are smaller items, we don't want to be doing too much of this. And there you go. It's a lot smaller and hardly noticeable, which is what you want. So again, hair dried, and now we're going to be a little bit more precise with our darker dust effects. And as you can see, try and get a nice tip on the brush that you're applying it with. And then again, it's really just a matter of putting in the places where you feel that the dust would gather, and the dirt and the grime. And then once applied, get your blending brush. Yeah, in this stage you can create some lovely effects as you start to build up those layers. These items are obviously going to have to be stuck onto the side panel once they've all been done. People do ask me how I go about that. What I usually do, you have to be very careful, but if you do use some paint remover on a cotton bud, and just gently take off the paint off the back, if there's any on there anyway. I mean, these are fine because this is all on the front, but sometimes you do get a bit of paint on the join. And then personally, I do use slow drying super glue, just so that you got a few seconds to sort of move it around and make sure that it's on. But more often than not, that does do the job. And then once you have stuck all these smaller items back on, then yes, you will need to do a little bit more OPR just to sort of blend the two parts together. But you don't have to go overboard. And if time is on your side, then you can always come back to it in a week or so and do it that way if you want to. But if not, then just carry on using the hairdryer. So as you can see now, I'm using some earth colours. Just want to muddy these up a little bit and add a bit of dirt tone to it. Obviously, if this wasn't an out-of-box build, then I'd be adding straps and all that sort of stuff. But just making do with what's in the kit itself. Again, if you're making straps for bags and that sort of thing, you can either use stuff like Milliput, cut it into strips, or the green stuff and cut it into strips, or you can use Tamiya tape. There's several different methods that people use to make straps for their bags. So with the light colours done, just going to start adding some darker colours to this one. And again, it's just in the obvious places where the creases are, etc., where you think a bit of dirt and that would sit. Just using a slightly smaller blending brush now. And don't forget, once you finish this process, if you want to add a bit of colour back, then you can always just dry brush it with the original oil colour of the part. So for example, the black one, you can dry brush it with black oil, the green ones with green oil, etc., etc. And that does sometimes create a nice effect. Or you can get a blending brush, again, precious little thin on it, and just run it along the edges just to take a layer of oil off. I'm not a great one for taking it off because obviously I've taken a lot of time to put it on, but it can create a nice effect in some instances. So again, just trial and error and practice and see how you get on. So we're adding a bit more of a darker wash now to add a few more stains. And a bit more interest. But you will find your burnt umber and your raw umber and your sepia are your main dark colours that you use. There are others out there like Valkyrie brown and warm sepia and those sort of things. So feel free to add them to your palette and mix them up as you go to create all the different look. Yeah, apologies for the focus, not too good here. Now you'll notice that throughout the whole of this process I've not used any varnishes whatsoever. There's no need to varnish in between each layers. As long as you hair dry it and dry out each layer and your application with the thinners is controlled, you'll have no need to put any type of barriers at all on your oil work. So he's coming along really well now. So that's that. Hopefully you've enjoyed the tutorial and it's been of use. Give you an insight into the way that I actually weather my vehicles using the oil paint rendering system. And that just leaves me to show you the final pictures. Obviously the same principles we use throughout the whole of the interior. And I'd just like to say thanks very much indeed for popping in and having a look at my work, and a big thank you to all of my subscribers for your continued support. Happy modelling, everyone.